that grand jury indicted those people based exactly on what was posted that morning. So the question is, what did that prosecutor tell that grand jury? I wanted to go over a few things related to our justice system and what's taking place and put them in context so they're not only understandable, but to explain that Donald Trump has a way to at least initially punch his way out of this paper bag. Maybe not ultimately, but initially. I get calls all the time on radio, what can he do? What can we do? Well, we can't do a hell of a lot, except vote. But I wanted to get into this a little bit, so let me set the table first. Who are some of these actors? You've heard of this judge in the District of Columbia, Chutkan. She was appointed by Obama. She donated to Obama. She is the most radical judge in the federal district court system, and there's about 1,000 of them. She is a bomb thrower. And her ruling the other day that the trial for January 6th should start on March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday, is more evidence of what a fraud she is as a judge. She's not a professional, she's not objective, she's not balanced. She's a bomb thrower. Now the government, through Jack Smith, had asked for a January trial. Everybody knew that was nuts. But Smith knows how to play this judge and the other Obama judges in that courthouse because they want him to do things like that so they can come off as being reasonable. It's almost as if they're talking to one another. And so she puts the date March. She says, look, I met them halfway. Trump's lawyers wanted 2026, which was kind of ridiculous. What they should have asked for, in my view, is 2025 after the election. But they too know what kind of judge they're dealing with. So she says that's too extreme, and the prosecutor wants January, that's too extreme, so I pitched March. That is so outrageous. She handed Smith and Garland and the Biden administration everything they wanted because they knew January was never going to happen. That's 4 months from now. Somebody told me that they're talking about 12 million documents, maybe 100 witnesses. They were investigating from the U.S. attorney to the special counsel for about 2.5 years. And you have 6 months to prepare your defense? President Trump's lawyer said, this is not going to be effective representation by counsel. That's almost impossible to do this. But she directed him to try. She also is very sinister in another way. She's not going to move the venue. She hasn't ruled on that yet, but she made it clear because she said during the hearing that she's going to keep an eye on the jury process, the selection of jurors, and she's going to keep an eye on partisanship and so forth. What she was doing was setting up Donald Trump. That is, by making a statement like that, if Donald Trump posts something on Truth Social or now X, Twitter, or says something about the judge or about the case, what will she do? She'll turn around and say, you, Mr. Trump, are the one who's trying to influence this fantastic jury we have that we picked out of Washington, D.C., which voted 94% for Biden. So if you're concerned about partisanship, you caused it. So the judge is not really a judge. She is a hack. Oh, and what I wanted to mention about her is her ancestry is Jamaican. Fine. We all have ancestry that's not American. We come from somewhere to come to this great country. So that's not my point. But my point is her grandfather was a very active Marxist who sought to overthrow the government in Jamaica. He was so bad that for a period of time, they put him in prison. That's her grandfather. She's never renounced her grandfather. We have D.A. Fannie Willis in Atlanta. Her father was a member of a domestic terrorist group, you probably heard of them, the Black Panthers, another Marxist group that sought the overthrow of the white-dominant, capitalist American system. She's never denounced her father, and she's also campaigning on indicting Donald Trump. Alvin Bragg, you know, was installed in part by George Soros. he campaigned on indicting Trump. Look at the group of these people. And then you have Jack Smith. He was the man behind, he was the invisible hand behind the attack on the Tea Party, which Obama had condemned. That is the Tea Party, because the Tea Party cost him the House. I think they picked up over 60 seats and a number of seats in the Senate. So he read a piece in the New York Times on the front page, as I discussed on my Fox show. He called meetings. He aggressively pushed for criminal prosecutions. This guy is a nut. He's completely out of control. But the bottom line is, what happened was they chilled Tea Party activity, the Tea Party organizations, and other conservative organizations. And he did that to help Obama. So these are some of the prosecutors and one of the judges that are involved in these cases. It's just incredible. I wanted to break this down further. Let's start with this. I'm going to talk to you about two motions. And I try to do this so it's very interesting, compelling, maybe intriguing, but it's important. There's something called the anti-suit injunction. The anti-suit injunction, what is that exactly? That's when a judge issues an order telling the prosecution or another party, the plaintiff, to cease from prosecuting their case until the case in her courtroom is completed. After that, they can pursue their case. Now, in this instance with Trump, it's crucially important for several reasons. Number one, the first federal indictments were brought related to the documents case. Now, the documents case was brought before the wrong grand jury in the wrong venue in Washington, D.C. Why? Because Jack Smith is a sleazeball. Because Merrick Garland is a sleazeball. Because whoever they're collaborating with at the White House, Bratt and others, are sleazeballs. You don't use a grand jury in a venue where most of the activity did not occur. Most of the document issues relate to matters in Florida and Mar-a-Lago. That was a no-brainer. But the special counsel wanted an indictment, and he might not have gotten one in Florida. So he used the D.C. grand jury to do just that. Then, he didn't suddenly realize, but he did know, I got to get this out of D.C. because Trump and the other defendants will have a very strong case of prosecutorial misconduct here, and this violates the Department of Justice rules, which it does. So he moves the indictments to a grand jury in Florida. And then they indict. The problem is, under the Fifth Amendment, you are to be indicted by a grand jury in fact. You are to be indicted by a grand jury in truth. Meaning, what exactly was the grand jury in Florida told, and what evidence did they see? 2.5 years in Washington, D.C., millions of pages of documents discussed, scores and scores of witnesses. The law was described in exquisite detail, presumably. When it goes to Florida, the same thing is to occur, except obviously because they started in Washington, D.C., they're not going to see the witnesses. They're not going to have the hands-on knowledge, listening, viewing that took place in Washington, D.C. So you have to be very careful that the Florida grand jury is not simply rubber stamping what happened in Washington, D.C. Remember, it's the prosecutors who present to the grand jury. And you got to make sure that what they presented the grand jury with in Florida is enough information where they can make a decision that these crimes were probably committed, probable cause, due process, indictment by a grand jury. That's all in the Constitution. So what exactly was the grand jury in Florida told? Did they have any questions? Did they have any questions about witnesses? Were they able to talk to any witnesses? What about the documents? What exactly were they shown? What exactly were they told? And so forth and so on. Did they have questions about the law? Was the law explained to them? We have no idea. But because Jack Smith played fast and loose with the venue and used the venue in Washington, D.C. to get the indictments and then moved them to Florida, where another grand jury is, this is very important. It's more than pertinent. It is critical. And so my thinking there is that the Trump lawyers and other lawyers should be bringing a motion over jury misconduct, grand jury misconduct by the prosecutor. And that even though federal grand juries, their activities are in secret, at this point that doesn't matter because the charges have been brought, the same exact charges in two different jurisdictions. So that's number one. Number two, in Georgia, this is very critical as well. You have due process procedures in Georgia that mimic what's in the federal Constitution, but the federal Constitution also applies. So what happened in Georgia? It was very weird, wasn't it? We wake up, we're told that the president's going to be facing grand jury possible indictments. That was the day. Police were out, all kinds of security was out, everything was being done. Except one thing really weird happened. The indictment with all the charges, 98 pages, had already been posted on the official government website of the clerk of the court. Now, the clerk of the court didn't make up these charges. The clerk of the court was handed this from the prosecutor's office. So the prosecutor's office assumed that everything that they were going to tell the grand jury would be rubber stamped. So that shows up in the morning. Then Fani Willis realizes she has a problem. She desperately rushes through the rest of the process. Any final people to be heard from, some people who said to show up, they were told they're not needed anymore. Witnesses were told they're not needed anymore. And then they indict late at night. And everybody's, what are they doing that for? Why not wait till the next day? Because she violated the due process rights of 19 individuals, including the president, including Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows and Jenna Ellis and so many others. Why? Because that grand jury indicted those people based exactly on what was posted that morning. So the question is, what did that prosecutor tell that grand jury?
Want to see more? Sign up for BlazeTV.